Before we begin, all of these stories were collected from real people through forums, social media, and private messages. If you enjoy this kind of content, support our channel by subscribing, and if this video resonates with you, leave a like. It helps us find even more stories like these. And after watching, be sure to leave a comment. Which of these situations would you absolutely never want to be in? We're curious to see which moment hits you the hardest. Thanks for your patience. Now turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. I grew up in a place called Emory, Mississippi. Tiny town, you blink, you miss it. It was the kind of place where gas stations still had those rolling signs that clicked as prices changed and people left their keys in their cars overnight. My mom ran the diner on Main Street. My dad was a mechanic, though most folks just called him the guy who could fix anything with duct tape. I was 17 the summer this happened. Senior year was creeping up and I needed money. Not for college, I knew I wasn't going, but for gas, smokes, and maybe saving up for a half-decent truck. That's how I ended up working part-time for Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins owned a large patch of land about 2 miles out from town. Barns, fields, sheds, most of it run down or swallowed by weeds. He lived alone in a ranch-style house, surrounded by nothing but tall grass and silence. Folks didn't talk much about him, but when they did, it was vague. "Used to be in the Navy," someone would say. "Or prison," someone else would whisper. He wasn't mean, just quiet. Didn't say much unless he had to. Paid me cash, under the table, $5 an hour to cut weeds, fix fence posts, clean out sheds. It was mindless, hot work, but it was work, and for a while that was all it was. Until the day I found the trailer. It was an old beat-up shipping container, parked way out behind the cornfield, almost swallowed by wild grass. I didn't even notice it for weeks. There was no reason to go out that far, not unless you were looking for snakes or heat stroke. But one day, I had to chase down a busted water line, and there it was, this long, rusted metal box with a heavy chain and padlock across the doors. The second I saw it, something in my gut twisted. It wasn't just the way it looked, though it did look wrong, sun-bleached, dented, like it had been dragged out there and forgotten. It was how quiet everything got when I stood near it. No cicadas, no birds, just wind and heat and that low thrum in your chest when your body knows something you don't. I mentioned it to Mr. Jenkins that afternoon, offhand, like I wasn't curious as hell. He looked up from sharpening his machete and said, flatly, "Don't go near it." That was it. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I nodded, said, "Sure." Didn't push, but that trailer, it itched at the back of my brain. Like a splinter you can't see, but you can't stop touching. A few weeks went by. Summer thickened. The heat got stupid. I kept working, mowing, spraying, hauling. And every now and then, I'd catch a whiff of something nasty in the wind when I got near that part of the field. Rot, maybe, or garbage, or bleach. One Friday, late in the afternoon, I noticed the chain on the trailer looked loose, like someone had fumbled with it, maybe tried to take it off. Jenkins wasn't home. I knew because his truck wasn't in the driveway and the front door was locked. I don't know what got into me. Maybe I was bored, maybe I was stupid, probably both. I grabbed a crowbar from the shed and headed out behind the cornfield. The padlock was old but thick. I didn't try to break it. I just tugged on the doors, and to my surprise, one of them groaned open an inch or two. The air that came out was warm and wet, not like the outside heat, but like a greenhouse, heavy with mold and something else. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, leaned in. There were no windows inside, just metal walls. Shelves lined the left side. On the floor were several large plastic bins, some of them taped shut. One had dried something I hoped it was mud-smeared along the rim. In the corner was what looked like an old freezer, unplugged. Before I could even think about stepping in, I heard gravel crunching behind me. I froze, then turned around slowly. Mr. Jenkins stood maybe 10 feet away. No truck, no sound, just standing there. His face was blank, but his hands were clenched. After a long pause, he said, "That's not for you." I said I was sorry, that I thought maybe something had broken loose. I tried to play dumb, but I'm a terrible liar, and we both knew it. He just stared at me and said, "Go home. Now." I left. Didn't go back the next day, or the day after. On Monday morning, I biked past his place just to see. The trailer was gone. Completely gone. No tire tracks, no flattened grass, just empty space, like it had never existed. I asked my buddy Pete, who lived on the next farm over, if he saw anything. He said, "Yeah, I saw a truck out there Saturday night. Big rig, no markings. Left around midnight. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they didn't care. I tried to forget about it. But then in October, a girl from our town, Emily, went missing. She was 19, worked at the grocery store. Vanished on her way home. The sheriff put up flyers. Volunteers searched the woods. They never found anything. A few weeks later, someone broke into the town maintenance garage and stole 3 barrels of industrial cleaner and a chainsaw. No suspects, no cameras. And then, silence. In January, Jenkins moved out. For sale sign went up, no goodbye. House sat empty for months, then someone bought it, a couple from out of state. I never told anyone what I saw. Not really. What would I say? "Hey, remember that quiet guy who paid me to mow his grass? I think he had a murder trailer behind his cornfield." But I still think about it. That smell, those bins, the silence in the air around that trailer. And the way he looked at me, not angry, not afraid, just tired. Like he'd been carrying something for a long time and was one slip away from dropping it all. Some nights, when the air is still and the crickets cut out all at once, I remember the way that heat rolled out of that open door. I remember that voice, not angry, not panicked, just quiet, warning me like he'd warned others before me. "That's not for you." I moved to Briar Ridge, Idaho, in the fall of 2013. Small place. Population around 300, though half of them were seasonal or retirees. I just left a job in Boise after a pretty messy breakup and was looking for something I don't know. Quieter, maybe. Simpler. My cousin knew a guy who managed some out-of-the-way rental homes in the area. Said one of them had just opened up cheap, isolated, peaceful. That's how he put it. The house was a single-story cabin at the end of a gravel road, about 10 minutes outside town. It backed up to a slow, shallow creek, and the only way in or out was over an old wooden bridge with sagging boards and missing planks. The water underneath was barely knee-deep, but it ran cold and constant. You could hear it at night, through the walls. Like white noise, if white noise carried just the faintest edge of unease. The house itself was fine. Wood paneling, old appliances, fireplace that smoked a little when the wind blew from the east. There was a large backyard and nothing but trees behind it, or so I thought. Took me about a week to realize there was another house on the far side of the creek, tucked into the tree line. You couldn't see it from the road, and even from the back porch, it was barely visible unless the leaves were down. First time I noticed, it was one morning while having coffee on the steps. I caught a flicker of sunlight reflecting off something, maybe a window, and squinted through the trees. Roofline, tin, partially rusted. Definitely a structure. I figured someone else lived there. I'd introduce myself eventually. Only thing was, I never saw anyone. No smoke from a chimney. No cars coming or going. No lights at night, just nothing. And for a while, I left it alone. After everything I'd just been through in Boise, the last thing I wanted was neighbor drama. Until the lights started. First time was around 2:00 a.m. I'd been asleep on the couch and woke up needing water. As I passed the back window, I noticed a soft white glow bleeding through the trees, not flashing. Not a flashlight or car beams. Just steady light, like someone had turned on a generator-powered flood lamp behind the brush. I stood there for a long minute trying to make sense of it. I almost opened the door, but something stopped me. Not fear exactly, more like tension. Like walking into a room where an argument just ended, The lights went off after maybe 20 minutes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I walked down the slope behind the house to the edge of the creek. There was a path barely leading through the trees toward the other house. I could make out more of it now. Old, gray siding, part of the roof caved in, broken windows. Definitely abandoned. So where had the lights come from? I called the rental manager, an older guy named Alan, and asked about the house across the creek. He paused and said, "That place? Nah, it's empty. Has been since the Lamberts." I asked, "The who?" He muttered, "Long time ago. Should have been torn down. No utilities. Just leave it be." That night, the lights came back. This time brighter. I stood on the back porch, holding my coffee mug like it was a weapon, staring through the dark trees. There was movement. Shadows crossing in front of the light. I thought about yelling, then thought better of it. I stayed up, watching, until the lights blinked off at 3:14 exactly. The next morning, I drove into town and stopped by the post office. Asked the clerk a woman named Rhonda, who used to live across the creek. She went still for a moment, then gave this tight smile. "You're renting that cabin?" I nodded. She lowered her voice and leaned in. "They don't talk about that house much anymore. Husband was a contractor. Wife worked at the vet. Fire started in the kitchen. Gas leak, maybe. Took them both. Some say they heard screaming from the woods for hours after. I didn't know what to do with that. Wasn't even sure I believed it. But that night, I made the mistake of walking out to the creek again. It was after 1:00 a.m. cold. Full moon. I had a flashlight and a thermos of coffee like some kind of amateur detective. I didn't plan to cross the bridge, just wanted a closer look. The air changed as I got near the creek. Quieter. No frogs, no wind. Even the water sounded stiller. Then I saw them. 2 figures on the other side, standing just beyond the edge of the woods. Not moving, just standing there, facing my direction. The light was behind them now, I couldn't see their faces. I don't even know if they were real people or scarecrows or goddamn shadows. But I backed up, slowly, all the way to the porch. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a bat and my keys in my hand, phone charged and flashlight on the table. At 3:14 exactly, the light went out again. I gave notice the next day. Alan didn't ask why. But on my last morning there, I found something under the doormat. A single key. Rusted. Old-fashioned. Like for a chest or a padlock. Tied to it was a note written in pencil. "You should have stayed inside." I threw it into the creek and drove off. Never looked back. Never found out what happened to the Lamberts. Never figured out what the lights were. I still don't know who left the key. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe none of it meant anything. But I still wake up sometimes at 3:14 on the dot, heart pounding, like someone's watching from across the water. And every time I do, I remember the way those 2 figures stood, not moving, not speaking, as if they were waiting for something to cross the creek. I lived in Medford, Oregon, for most of my 20s. Small town. Not tiny, but small enough that if you went to the same bar twice, the bartender would remember your order and who you came in with. I worked at a tire shop off Route 62 and rented the top floor of a house on Alder Street. It wasn't fancy wood-paneled walls, uneven floors, one of those old fridges that hummed too loudly when it kicked on. But it was cheap, and I liked the neighborhood. The block was mostly older folks, retired couples, quiet types, people who mowed their lawns on Saturdays and kept wind chimes on their porches. Everyone was friendly in that surface-level, wave from the sidewalk kind of way, except for one guy. His name was Jerry. Lived 2 houses down, by himself. Jerry was quiet. Not shy quiet. Something else. He didn't wave, didn't mow, didn't come to the block parties or holiday cookouts. The paint on his house was peeling. Curtains always drawn. We all assumed he had some kind of disability, or maybe just didn't like people. No one pushed it. The only reason I ever interacted with him at all was because his trash cans kept ending up in the middle of the street. Not knocked over, just placed there, like someone had dragged them halfway to the curb and changed their mind. The first time, I rolled them back up his driveway, knocked on the door, got no answer. But the next morning, they were right back where I'd found them. I figured maybe raccoons or kids messing around. It kept happening. Once a week, always late Sunday or early Monday, they'd be in the street again. I stopped moving them. Everyone did. We joked about it, called it Jerry's weekly trash parade. But the jokes stopped after spring. It started with the smell. At first, it was faint sour, like damp mulch. I thought maybe something had died under my porch. Then other neighbors started noticing. Flies, mostly, hovering near Jerry's house, gathering around his windows. Then came the mail, or rather, the lack of it. The woman who walked our route said she hadn't seen him in weeks. His mailbox was crammed full, papers sticking out like a bad cartoon. Someone finally called it in. I think it was Edna from next door, and a welfare check was done. I wasn't home when the cops arrived, but when I got back from work that day, there were 2 cruisers out front and an ambulance with no lights on. They wheeled him out under a tarp. We didn't hear much. Rumors flew, natural causes, maybe a fall, maybe drugs. Nobody knew. The coroner's van came and went. Jerry's door stayed shut for a month. Eventually, a property management company showed up, cleaned out the house, changed the locks, and posted a for sale sign. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. It started with the cans again. A week after the sign went up, the trash bins were back in the street. Same spot, both of them. Just sitting there like always. I thought maybe the cleaners forgot to move them back, so I rolled them up to the garage. The next day, back in the street, I asked around. No one had seen anyone on the property. No cleaners, no potential buyers, no lawn crew, nothing. Then I started hearing sounds. Not voices, just sounds, dragging, a thump maybe, always late, always faint. At first, I thought it was the neighbors, thin walls, maybe TV. But one night, around 2:00 a.m., I heard the gate to Jerry's backyard creak open. I looked out the window and saw the trash cans being dragged down the driveway. No one was behind them. I swear to God they were just moving. But when I blinked, there was someone. A shape. Tall, thin. Could have been a trick of the light or just my tired eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I walked down to the house. Cans were right there in the street, perfectly placed. I knocked on the door. Nothing. Walked around, back the yard was overgrown, gate wide open, like someone had gone through in a hurry. That night, it got worse. Around 3:00 a.m., I woke to the sound of something dragging across my porch. Not the steps, the porch. Like someone was circling the house. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just lay there, frozen, listening. Then came the knock. Not on my front door, on my bedroom window. Just a single knock, sharp, deliberate. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked out the window. Nothing. Just the side yard, dark and still. I didn't sleep again that night. Called in sick to work the next day. Around noon, I walked down to Jerry's place again this time. I brought a crowbar. The door was locked, but the side window wasn't. I forced it open and climbed in. The house was empty, stripped to the floors. No furniture, no appliances. Nothing but dust and faint outlines where the couch and TV must have been. I stepped through the kitchen, into the hallway. All the bedroom doors were open, all except one. Jerry's. It was shut tight. I turned the knob, locked. I stepped back, thought about it. Then I left. I don't know why I chickened out. Something about that door just felt wrong. That night, I stayed up, didn't turn out the lights, kept the bat by the couch. Around 2:43 a.m., I heard it again, the gate, the cans, the dragging. This time I looked. There was someone in Jerry's yard. Not a ghost, not a shadow, A man. He was crouched by the trash bins, adjusting them, like someone repositioning art. Then he stood, turned slowly, and looked straight at me. I backed away from the window. Didn't sleep. Next morning, I filed a report. Told the police someone was trespassing. They sent an officer, took a statement, nodded like they'd heard crazier, promised to keep an eye out. That weekend, the for sale sign disappeared. Not taken down, just gone. By Monday, there was fresh paint on the house. A new mailbox. The trash bins gone. It was like nothing had ever happened. I asked Alan, my landlord, if someone had bought the place. He said no. Still pending. He even checked the county site while I stood there. But someone was in that house. The lights came on at night. I saw a shape moving in the front window. I even heard a lawnmower once. But no cars, no mail, no signs of life during the day. Then, one night, the dragging came again. Only this time, it wasn't trash. It was closer, heavier. I opened the front door. A crack, just enough to peek outside. There, at the bottom of my steps, was one of Jerry's trash cans. Empty, clean. And inside, tucked against the bottom, was a note, folded once, no envelope. All it said was, "Your turn." I moved out the next morning. Left Medford within the week. Last I checked, the house on Alder still hasn't sold. Still shows up in listings as pending. But I know better. Someone's still there. Someone who never really left. In 2016, I worked as a field rep for a water filtration company. It was the kind of job where you're constantly driving back roads, industrial parks, county fairs, anywhere someone might buy a water softener system. No office, no coworkers, just a laptop, company van, and a gas card. By midsummer, my territory included most of central Illinois. I drove hundreds of miles each week and stayed in motels, guest cabins, or extended stay parks wherever I could find cheap, quiet lodging. That's how I ended up at a place called Greystone Pines Mobile Living Community, just outside of Redwell. It sounds fancy, but it wasn't. It was a gravel loop trailer park with sagging chain-link fences and sun-bleached plastic chairs on every porch. A rusted Coke machine stood next to the laundry room, humming like an old generator. My rental was lot 12, near the entrance. $50 a night, weekly discount if you paid cash. I was only supposed to stay 3 days. I ended up staying 12. At first, it was just another stop on the route. I'd get up at 6, make coffee in the tiny microwave, and drive out to meet clients all day. Return around sunset, heat up something frozen, type up notes, and crash early. The people were quiet, mostly older. A few long-haul drivers. One family with a teen boy who rode a bike in slow, endless circles. The only thing that stood out was Lot 31. It was tucked at the very back of the loop, behind an overgrown line of blackberry bushes that nearly blocked the view. You wouldn't even notice it unless you walked the full gravel circle. The trailer there was crooked, rust-stained, with a sagging roof and no visible car. Curtains always closed, screen door hanging open like it had been caught in a windstorm and never fixed. I asked the manager, Gus, about it on my 3rd day. He grunted. "Yeah, that's the old guy. Keeps to himself. Pays in cash. No problems." I didn't ask more. Why would I? It started small, just a flicker of something you can't quite place. Every evening, I'd walk to the vending machine near the laundry room. From there, I had a narrow sight line through the hedges toward Lot 31. More than once, I thought I saw movement, just a shift in the curtains, like someone watching through the slit. When I looked directly, it would vanish. One night, just past 11, I was walking back with a soda and I heard something behind the bushes. A sharp, metallic scrape. Long, deliberate. It reminded me of the sound my dad made, dragging a shovel across the driveway in winter. I froze. Then it stopped. I waited. Nothing. Eventually, I walked back to my trailer, slower than usual, looking over my shoulder. The next morning, I took the long way around and casually passed by Lot 31. The grass behind it, what little of it wasn't overtaken by weeds, looked disturbed. Not just stepped on, but churned, like someone had dug and refilled a hole. Fresh dirt, no grass, a small pile of earth still clung to the siding. I told myself it was probably plumbing work, or maybe nothing at all. But I started locking my trailer door at night after that. On the 6th day, something new appeared. A child's sneaker. Pink, with Velcro straps, maybe a size 3 or 4. It was sitting dead center on my front step, facing the door. I don't have kids. No one in the park did, as far as I'd seen. I picked it up with a rag and left it on the bench by the laundry room. It was gone the next morning. Later, I asked Gus about it. He just shook his head and muttered, "Weird things happen. Best not to think too hard about them." I laughed it off, but it stuck with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the trailer felt louder. The AC kicked on, and I nearly jumped. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard the scrape again, longer this time, followed by what sounded like a dragging sound. Not fast, not frantic, rhythmic, heavy. I looked through the blinds. Nothing, but I knew where it was coming from. I laid awake until dawn. By day 9, I wasn't focused on work anymore. I kept watching the back loop, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever lived at Lot 31. But no one ever came or went. No lights, no car, nothing. Then the trailer next to Lot 31, Lot 30, a faded blue unit, went quiet. A woman had lived there, I think. I'd seen her outside a few times with an oxygen tank, waving to the mail truck, but suddenly, silence. No more movement. No lights. On day 10, I knocked on her door. No answer. No sound. By day 11, her mailbox was overflowing. I told Gus. He just nodded like he already knew. "She left," he said. "Left?" I asked. "Just like that?" He nodded again. "Health stuff. Her niece came, but no niece ever showed up." That night I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and took the outer loop, walking slow past the hedges and toward the back of the park. The moon was high, cold, quiet. When I reached Lot 31, I paused. The trailer looked dead, sagging. The blinds were drawn, but I swore something shifted inside. I crouched down near the side and aimed my flashlight behind it. That's when I saw the ground. Multiple spots freshly dug, refilled, padded flat. At least 4. No tools, no footprints, just soft dirt. And then I heard the breathing. Low, raspy, close. I turned and caught a glimpse through the blinds. Just an eye, right at me. I ran. Didn't stop until I was inside, door locked, shades down. My heart was pounding. Every instinct I had screamed, "Leave!" But something made me stay one more night. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to tell myself I was overreacting. At 2:10 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something brushing against my trailer wall. Then the softest knock on the door. Not loud. Not urgent. Just present. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After a minute, there was silence again. I waited another 10. Then 20. Then fell asleep sometime near dawn. When I stepped outside the next morning, there was a piece of folded paper tucked under my windshield wiper. No envelope. One sentence, typed in old-style courier font. "Stop asking questions." That was it. I packed everything in 10 minutes, left the keys in the lockbox, and drove 6 hours straight to a Motel 6 in Springfield. A few days later, out of morbid curiosity, I called the county clerk's office, asked about the resident at Lot 31. They said there was no current tenant. When I asked about the woman from Lot 30, they paused. "She passed away," the woman said softly. 3 months ago, which was impossible. because I'd seen her waving at the mail truck 2 weeks earlier. I hung up. That night, I dreamed about soft dirt and plastic shoes and someone standing silently at the foot of my bed. I never went back to Redwell, avoided Central Illinois altogether. But sometimes, when I pass an old trailer park on a back road, I catch myself scanning the far lots, looking for sagging rooftops, taped up windows, signs of recent digging, and I remember Lot 31 and the man who was never really there. In 2018, after my divorce, I moved back to my hometown Brighton, Missouri. I was 34, broke, and sleeping on my cousin's pull-out sofa. Eventually, I got a job managing a self-storage facility just off Highway 14. Not glamorous, but it was stable, and they let me live on site in a small apartment above the office. The place had 212 units, all lined up in rows behind a tall chain-link fence. Some people used them for overflow from their garages, some for boats. Some, I'm pretty sure, for things they didn't want anyone else seeing. But the rules were simple. Pay on time, don't sleep in the unit, and don't store anything flammable. Most renters came and went during daylight hours, but a few would show up late, real late, like 3 or 4 a.m. I'd sometimes see headlights sweep across my ceiling while I lay in bed. I told myself it wasn't my business, just night shift workers or bad planners. But there was one guy who always made my stomach tighten. Unit 137. He signed the lease in cash, didn't provide an email, just a P.O. box from another county. His name on paper was Martin Cole. Looked to be in his 50s, wore a ball cap pulled low and sunglasses even on overcast days. He never said more than a few words, just nodded, handed over rent in cash, and left. He rented one of the largest units we had, 10 by 30, with power access. Said he was storing equipment from a cleaning business, but I never saw him unload anything that looked like that. Instead, every few nights, his van would show up just after midnight. No logos, no plates. I once watched from the upstairs window as he opened the unit, went inside, and closed the roll-up door behind him. The lights inside flickered on, and I could see a faint yellow glow through the cracks. He stayed in there for hours. No sounds, no movement, just light, and that heavy feeling in your chest when you know something isn't right. The next morning, the unit would be closed again, lock in place like nothing happened. This went on for weeks. Eventually, I mentioned it to my boss, Diane, who ran 3 other locations in the region. I expected her to tell me to call the cops or check the unit. Instead, she shrugged and said, "If he's paid and not breaking anything, let it go. You'll learn to ignore the weird ones." So I did, until the smell started. It was faint at first, like rotting leaves or wet drywall. I assumed something had leaked, but it kept getting worse. One afternoon, I went to check the units down the row and nearly gagged. It was coming from 137. I tapped the side of the unit, no answer. Called the number on file, disconnected. Now I had reason to open it. We're not allowed to just pop locks without cause, but Diane approved it after I sent her a video of the smell pouring out like a fog. I waited until midday, bright sun, clear conscience. I opened the unit, and I swear my legs nearly gave out. Inside wasn't what I expected. There were tarps everywhere. Not just on the floor, they covered the walls, the ceiling, the door, nailed in, overlapping. Heavy-duty plastic sheets, stained in spots, dried, dark. In the center of the unit was a long metal table, like an autopsy table, except homemade. Welded legs, drain holes, a catch pan underneath. No tools, no bags, nothing else, except a single pair of rubber gloves lying on the floor. I backed out, shut the door, and called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes, 2 cruisers, quiet. I showed them the unit. They took photos, made a few calls. The lead officer told me they'd file a report and escalate to the county, which sounded like code for "don't expect answers soon." Then they asked me to leave the unit open and not touch anything. Martin Cole never came back, but 2 nights later, someone opened that unit. I was in bed when I heard the motor, the distinct clatter of our roll-up doors. I peeked out the window. Unit 137 was open again. Same van, only this time, someone was dragging something out, wrapped in a tarp, not carried dragged, slowly, methodically. I didn't move, didn't call anyone. I just stood at the window and watched. Whoever it was, and I don't even know if it was Cole, worked quickly, loaded the bundle into the back of the van, closed the unit, and drove off without headlights. The gate's camera was conveniently offline that night. I reported it. Cops came again, shrugged again, said they'd log it, and then nothing. Over the next few weeks, other renters started to move out. Word spread. People noticed the smell, not just in Unit 137, but in others nearby. We opened one unit, 139, after the renter failed to pay. Inside were 20 sealed buckets. Contractor grade. Heavy. We couldn't even lift most of them. When we opened one, it was full of black water and fragments. Bone? Plastic? The police took it, but I was never told the result. Diane stopped answering my calls after that. The company sent some new guy to help me close down. Said we were shutting the location due to low occupancy. The place was dead within a month. But before I left, I went back to Unit 137 one last time. The cops had cleared it. The table was gone. The tarps removed. It looked empty, except for one thing. On the back wall, barely visible under a smear of old tape, was a number. 4 digits. 1762. That was the unit number from my childhood storage locker. In another town, in another state, 15 years ago. I never told anyone that part. Never figured out how it made sense. But I haven't rented a storage unit since. And when I drive past those rows of identical doors, each one promising nothing but someone else's forgotten life, I wonder, how many are really empty? And how many just haven't been opened yet? When I bought my first house, I thought I was finally starting over. I'd just turned 29. Moved out of Chicago after a bad breakup and years of barely affording rent. I had enough saved up for a down payment on something small and quiet. Ended up finding a fixer-upper on the edge of a rural town in Iowa Dunfield. Population maybe 2. 0. 1 grocery store. No Starbucks. Just what I needed. The house itself was older 1970s ranch, low roof, wood paneling, worn carpet that smelled faintly like smoke, but the price was good, and the previous owner had left most of the appliances. The listing mentioned it had long-term rental history, but the realtor brushed it off as irrelevant. I should have asked more questions. The day I moved in, the neighbor across the street, an older guy in a John Deere cap, came over and introduced himself. "Name's Roy," he said. "You the one bought the Jensen place?" I nodded. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "So, you gonna let him stay, or?" I blinked. "Who?" He waved vaguely toward the side of the house. "The guy, in the back." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. Pretty sure the place came empty. Roy didn't laugh. He just said, "Huh," and walked back across the street. I explored every room. Nothing unusual, a few scuffs on the drywall, an old bottle of whiskey left in a cabinet, a weird stain under the sink, but no guy in the back. Still, that night, I had trouble sleeping. Maybe it was just nerves, or the silence of a town where traffic stopped by 8 p.m., but I kept thinking about Roy's face when he asked. So, around midnight, I grabbed a flashlight and checked the backyard. There was an old shed back there, rotted, half-collapsed, the door hanging crooked. I hadn't opened it earlier. Something about it just didn't seem important, but now it felt necessary. The inside was empty mostly. Some old paint cans, a rusted lawn chair, tangled fishing line, and in the corner, a pair of boots, work boots, Mud still caked on them, like someone had taken them off recently. No footprints, no signs of someone living there. But those boots were not decades old. They looked used. I left the shed and locked it. Next day, I asked the realtor again about the listing. She hesitated, said the man who lived there before me was named Greg Allen, rented the place for 11 years straight, never missed a payment, left quietly 3 months before it went up for sale. No forwarding address. I didn't think much of it until a week later. That's when I found the first note. It was on the kitchen table when I got home from work. Folded once, no envelope. My name written in neat, upright print. Inside, one sentence. "I'm fine with the shed if you are." That was it. I didn't know what to do. I walked the perimeter of the house, checked the doors and windows, all locked. No signs of forced entry. I called Roy. He came over in 5 minutes. When I showed him the note, he just nodded. "Saw him out there last night," he said. "Same as usual." "Who is he?" I asked. Roy paused. No one ever really knew. Lived in the house for years, even when other folks owned it. Sometimes the owners rented it to him. Sometimes they didn't. He just stayed quiet. Never bothered anyone. Was he dangerous? Roy shook his head. Nah, just didn't want to leave. I told him I wasn't okay with someone living in my backyard. Roy just said, "Then don't go looking for him. He don't like that." I tried to brush it off, told myself it was some prank. Maybe Roy was screwing with me. Maybe a drifter had taken to sleeping in the shed, and I'd just missed him. I replaced the lock, bought a motion light. But 3 nights later, the light came on at 2:11 a.m. I didn't look. I just lay there in bed, listening. Somewhere outside, gravel crunched. Then silence. The next morning, the lock was off again. Not broken, removed. Set neatly on the steps of the shed. And inside, the boots were gone. But on the chair sat a new note. I don't like being locked out. I started leaving the shed alone after that. Strange things kept happening. The water in the outdoor hose would be turned on, then off. The mailbox would be empty in the morning, even though I hadn't checked it yet. My trash can was dragged halfway down the drive one night. A rake leaned neatly against the fence. I didn't own a rake. It wasn't threatening, just consistent, like someone was politely cohabitating. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept my bedroom door locked. I stopped sitting on the back porch. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? Someone might be living on my property, but I can't prove it. On the 18th day, I stayed home from work. Sat in the dark from midnight to 3 a.m., watching the shed through the blinds. Nothing. At 3:12, I blinked just for a second. When I looked again, the door was open, wide, and the chair was empty. No one walked in or out. But on my kitchen table the next morning was another note. "You're watching too hard." That day, I drove to the county clerk's office and asked for property records. It took a while, but they found a thin file with 4 pages. It listed 3 previous owners. But for 15 years between 1999 and 2014, there was no official owner on record. Probably a clerical error, the clerk said. I asked if someone named Greg Allen had ever owned the house. She frowned. "No, but that name's familiar." She pulled another file. Turns out, Greg Allen had filed a complaint against the city in 2013, said the property was his by possession and right of continuity. The complaint was denied. That night, I left a note of my own in the shed. "What do you want?" In the morning, there was a reply on my pillow. "To stay, same as you." I moved out 2 weeks later. Sold the place at a loss to a couple from Des Moines, who said they liked the seclusion. I didn't warn them. I figured, if he really didn't want to leave, he wouldn't. And maybe, if you don't try to lock him out, he won't try to come in. In the summer of 2020, I moved to a neighborhood called Oakwood Hills, about 20 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was a quiet little suburb, mostly ranch homes and minivans, the kind of place where people took pride in lawn stripes and waved when they walked their dogs. I just landed a remote IT job and wanted out of city traffic, so I found a rental at the end of a cul-de-sac, brick house, detached garage. Low rent because the previous tenant had left suddenly. That should have been a red flag, but I was just happy to have space and silence. For the first few weeks, it was perfect, peaceful, predictable. Then a man named Curtis showed up. I first met him during a Saturday morning walk. He was maybe 50, thin, glasses, always wore tucked-in polos like a retired golf coach. He introduced himself as coordinator of the Oakwood Volunteer Watch. I said something like, "Cool, neighborhood security?" He smiled. "Just neighbors keeping each other safe." Over the next few days, I noticed his presence everywhere. Curtis wasn't just on walks. He was on rounds, clipboard in hand, logging times, watching cars. Sometimes I'd catch him standing on the sidewalk across from my place, just standing. No phone. No dog. Just watching. One evening, I took my trash out and found a printed notice taped to my can. "Please, place bins at the curb no earlier than 6:30 p.m. Early placement invites scavengers and lowers community standards. OVWP." I hadn't even known there were rules like that. Next morning, there was another paper on my porch. Reminder: backyard lights left on past 2:0 a.m. Please ensure outdoor illumination aligns with quiet hours. There were no signatures, but I knew it was Curtis. I tried to ignore it, figured he was just lonely, maybe a little obsessive. Then I started hearing the walkie-talkies. Late at night, sometimes around 1 or 2 a.m., I'd catch the soft crackle of radios from outside. One voice would mutter, "Sector 3 clear." Another would respond, "Copy. Sector 1 stable." I'm in Sector 2, apparently. I once peeked through the blinds and saw 2 people, not Curtis, walking slowly along the fence line with flashlights. I wanted to ask what the hell they were doing, but something in their body language made me hesitate. They weren't just patrolling, they were searching. Then things got personal. One day I came home to find my garage door open. Nothing was missing, but someone had moved a few boxes, not stolen, just rearranged. A hammer that used to be in the toolbox was now on the workbench. A can of WD-40 was uncapped and lying on its side. I called the police. They sent a patrol car. Took a report. Officer asked, "Any idea who might have had access?" I told him about Curtis. He nodded. "You're not the first to mention him." That stuck with me. A week later, Curtis knocked on my door. He smiled, held out a laminated folder, and said, "Just wanted to make sure you got our updated handbook." Inside was a list of recommended behaviors, parking angles, garbage schedules, flag protocol, and a bizarre section on friendly facial engagement ratios, which I swear is just a creepy way of saying, smile more. Then, near the back, I saw a printed calendar with shifts and names. Mine was on it. Sector 2, 12:0 a.m., 3:0 a.m., Thursday, T. Campbell, confirmed. I never signed up for anything. I asked, "What is this?" Curtis kept smiling. "It's important we all contribute." I told him I had work, that I wasn't interested. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes lost warmth. "Of course. Just know we all notice when someone doesn't participate." He left. That night, the light above my front door wouldn't turn on. I checked the bulb. Fine. Breaker? Fine. Wiring cut. Clean. Deliberate. Next morning, a sticky note was on my windshield. Dark houses invite attention. I started keeping logs. Photographed everything, the papers, the notes, even Curtis's patrol patterns. I emailed it to myself just in case. I even bought a trail cam, set it up facing my garage. Motion activated. 2 nights later, it caught someone. 1:41 a.m. A man approached my garage. Not Curtis. Shorter, heavier, hoodie. He looked straight at the camera, then took something out of his pocket, a small spray can. The feed goes black. He sprayed the lens. Next day, the camera was gone. In its place, another printed card on my doorstep. Unauthorized surveillance disrupts neighborly trust. OVWP, compliance subgroup. I took everything to the police. They listened, then shrugged. The watch program isn't officially recognized, but if they're not breaking laws, cutting my camera wire isn't breaking the law, prove it was them. And that was the end of that. By week 4, I felt trapped in my own house. Curtis and his people, and there were definitely others, were always nearby. Lawn chairs were repositioned to face my windows. I stopped opening the curtains. Once, I went for a run and came back to find my welcome mat turned upside down. Just that. Nothing else. I flipped it back. Next day, upside down again. Little things. Petty, but constant. Then I heard someone in my backyard at 2:17 a.m. I didn't go out, just waited until morning, found 2 sets of boot prints in the dewy grass. One led to my bedroom window. Another card was taped to the door. Your activity window has been extended. Please acknowledge participation. That day, I gave my landlord notice. I was leaving. Curtis came by the next evening. Didn't knock. Just stood at the edge of my yard with his arms crossed. You're not even going to say goodbye. I didn't answer. He waited a long time, then walked away. On moving day, everything was normal. I loaded the truck, double-checked the house, locked the door. When I opened the driver's side, I found an envelope tucked under the wiper. Inside, a photo of me taken from above sitting at my desk at night, headphones on. Unmistakable. My screen glowing. On the back, handwritten. You'd be surprised how often we're already inside. When I was 14, I lived in a town called Darrow in southern Michigan. Quiet place, 4,000 people maybe. A couple diners, a hardware store, 2 gas stations. Everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. That summer, before high school started, my friends and I were obsessed with biking. We'd ride everywhere through subdivisions, across old farms, down into the nature preserve trails where we weren't supposed to go. But there was one house we always avoided. Not because it was haunted, not because of any ghost stories, but because of the man who lived there. His name was Mr. Wallace. Lived alone in a 2-story colonial on Briar Lane. Big wraparound porch, peeling white paint, yellowed curtains always drawn. He didn't have a car, didn't cut the grass, didn't wave. He just watched. Every kid in town had a Mr. Wallace story. Someone would say they saw him standing at the upstairs window at 3 a.m. Someone else swore he once followed them home in silence, then disappeared. Most of us thought it was just small-town boredom feeding into myth. But the older kids never biked down Briar Lane. They never explained why. They just didn't. My first encounter was small. I was riding home alone, cutting through a shortcut that brought me out near his house. I wasn't even thinking about it, but when I looked up, he was standing in the front yard. Not moving, not blinking, just standing, facing me. Like he knew I was coming. I slowed. He didn't move. When I passed, he raised one hand slowly and made a motion like he was tipping a hat. But he wasn't wearing one. The next day, I told my friend Josh about it. He said, "Yeah, he does that. He waits." For what? Josh didn't answer. About a week later, a kid named Nathan went missing. He was 12, rode his bike to the library around noon and never came back. Whole town got involved: flyers, search parties, sheriff driving up and down dirt roads. They drained the creek, interviewed teachers. Nothing. It became the only thing anyone talked about. But the bikes, the kids, they all started avoiding Briar Lane. Even kids who used to cut through that way stopped. No one said why. Then, one afternoon, Josh said he wanted to show me something. We biked out to the edge of town, behind the grain silos, where the older houses started thinning out. He stopped and pointed through a break in the tree line. "I followed Wallace," he said. "Last night." "You what?" "He walks," Josh whispered. "At night, real slow, circles around. I think he's looking for something." He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. It was blurry, dark, grainy, but you could see the figure. In the middle of a backyard that wasn't his. Just standing there. I was creeped out, but not convinced. Until 3 nights later, when I woke up at 2:30 a.m. I don't know why. Just felt. Watched. I got up to get water. And in the middle of my yard, 2 houses deep into a cul-de-sac, nowhere near Briar Lane, was someone standing completely still. Just inside the tree line, facing the house. I froze. He didn't move. I blinked, and he was gone. I told my parents. They said it was probably a neighbor, maybe someone cutting through the yards. "No one in this town does anything crazy," my dad said. "This isn't the city." But I started noticing other things. A dead bird on our porch. 2 days later, a second wing's folded, like it had been placed there. My bike seat moved, only slightly tilted at a weird angle. I always lined it straight. Mail delivered with envelopes, slid open. All small things, nothing illegal, but constant. Then Josh stopped coming to school. I texted, called. No answer. His parents said he had a family emergency, but he never came back. I biked to his house a few days later. His mom answered the door, eyes red, tired. She said Josh was gone to stay with his aunt. Then, quieter, she said, "I told him not to get involved. I told him..." She closed the door. I stood there, stunned, then biked straight to Briar Lane. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Confront him? Prove something? But when I got there, the house was different. Not in a big way. Just off. The curtains were gone. The grass had been cut. And on the porch sat Mr. Wallace, calm, still, as if he'd been waiting. He didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just watched. I stood at the sidewalk, my mouth dry. Finally, I asked, "Where's Josh?" He tilted his head. Didn't blink. Then, slowly, he pointed to the upstairs window. But it was empty. No movement. No light. Nothing. I rode home fast. Told my parents everything. They got angry. Said I was spreading stories. Said this town had been peaceful for decades, and people like me were the problem. I stayed home for a few days after that. But on the 5th night, I found a Polaroid on my windowsill, unmarked. Just an image of someone blurry, hoodie up, biking down a dirt road. Me, taken from behind. No one knew I'd gone out that day. After that, I started hearing noises. Taps on the windows. Clicks from the back door. Soft shuffling sounds across the porch. One night, I found a pile of rocks stacked neatly in the shape of a bicycle on our patio. No footprints. No tire marks. Just the rocks. Arranged perfectly. We moved in the fall. My dad said it was for his job, but I know better. My mom never let me bike again. I never saw Josh again either. Every now and then I search his name. Nothing. No socials. No mentions. Just gone. But sometimes I look up Briar Lane on Google Maps. The house is still there. Painted fresh now. New mailbox. Nice shrubs. But if you drop into Street View and angle just right, you'll see a man on the porch, sitting perfectly still, watching